So welcome, Yvonne. It's somewhat topical, actually, to have you here at the summit today, given what we've read in the newspaper yet again today about some more cyber security breaches. So I'm really looking forward to having a bit of a conversation with you about all of that.
Definitely, thank you.
So cyber security is something that most of us are just starting to learn a bit more about, and the Australian Cyber Security Centre has recently undertaken a survey to understand the current cyber security posture of small businesses. So out of that research, 62% of respondents confirmed they have previously been a victim of a cybersecurity incident, and 33% of small businesses surveyed consider the prospect of a cybersecurity incident impacting their business to be almost certain. How prepared are we? So Yvonne is a multidisciplined professional with 20 years hands-on experience in designing and implementing resilience and compliance programs for organisations across Australia and the UK. She's one of the 5 Australians certified as a Fellow of Information Privacy by the International Association of Privacy Professionals, and is one of only a handful of individuals globally to hold both a Masters in Information Security and Computer Crime and Masters in Information Law. In the past 3 years, Yvonne, with her 2 business partners, has led and grown ISDefence from a startup to Adelaide's premier business resilience company. So I'm going to ask Yvonne a few questions, and we're just going to hear a little more about cyber security. So first question for you, Yvonne. With many businesses altering their business delivery model, products and services to become more resilient, how does cyber security fit in?
Yeah, it's essential that any significant change to business structure, products, services, or how you deliver the end result triggers a conversation around risk profile. Cybersecurity is just a small element of that discussion, and in changing how you offer services, you need to have a conversation about, are you collecting any new information? Are you then subject to new regulations and obligations as a business owner? Are you opening yourself up to new risks or changing existing risks? So are you increasing the likelihood or consequence of the risk event? So it's essential to sort of trigger that conversation about, what changes have happened or are likely to happen, and how they may change your profile.
So what we've seen in the last few months in particular in our industry is a big shift from what we call bricks and mortar or the traditional channels moving into e-commerce. So some have only done that recently for the first time. What standards and regulations does our industry need to be mindful of?
Yeah, it's very interesting. There's quite a bit out there. First of all, it's great to see such innovation and quick changes to business structure, business profiles. So, businesses of all sizes have become resilient, and I must say I'm very impressed with the smaller businesses, especially locally adapting to doing Uber Eats and taking online orders, utilising services such as online chat groups, and Facebook, and all the other capabilities that we now luckily have this day and age. So in terms of regulations, so everybody needs to be aware of if you're collecting more personal information. So look at your obligations under the Privacy Act. So even if you're not actually obliged to comply with the requirements of the Privacy Act, it does lend, and the Office of Information Commissioner provides a lot of really good, useful information about how you protect personal information, especially in the context of information security. Whatever, be considerate about the type and quantity and quality of the information that you're collecting. And that goes for any information type, not just personal information. So really think about, do you need to be collecting that information in the first place? So in terms of if you're transitioning to e-commerce, you may have new obligations under the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. That's PCI DSS. Typically, the end users are exactly that, so they're using a merchant bank or something like PayPal. So look under the contract terms or who you're now using to make those card payments. Ensure that they, as a third party, are they themselves secure, and you're protecting your client's data at every stage. So so they're the key ones. Obviously, the Corporations Act comes into play in terms of directorship, understanding their obligations to risk management, understanding how changes within the company have changed the risk profile again. So get legal advice, get general support from experts such as ourselves, and we can guide you and point you in the right direction in terms of standards and regulations.
Great. So what can organisations do to ensure that they can be agile and maintain security?
Yeah. To be agile, you really need to understand and be confident with the security controls that you have in place. Having really good understanding of your current capabilities allows you to make very quick decisions and enables you to be agile in that approach. So getting a really good understanding of your key controls. These are controls that help you to manage the likelihood or consequence of cybersecurity risk. Get a really good handle of the baseline security controls that you have in place. So these are the basics.
So in terms of baseline, what are some of those baselines that you need?
Yeah. Information security is pretty much where Occ Health and Safety was about 15, 20 years ago. So we know that you don't have cabling running in the middle of the room, you just put a tape over it. So I'm sure many organizations now do antivirus management, so at least have one antivirus software on your systems. So that is a given, even personally thinking that's a given. So we're getting better in that regard. But backups, making sure that you have good, reliable backups available to you. Patch management. So patch management on operating systems and applications, making sure that any alerts for updates you're keeping on top of. So, even from your home environment through to large organizations, it's very simple to keep up to date with those alerts that come through to update your software. And access controls, making sure that you have individual user IDs, password management, and things like that in place. So the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, ACSC, provide a lot of free information to organisations online about what they call the Essential 8.
Excellent. What are the Essential 8? That's really
pretty.
Oh, we've done them. Okay, good. All right. So, so there's really 8 things that you need to think about as the baseline.
As the absolute base,
Yep.
If you're starting from scratch, these are the absolute things you need to put in place, because they're industry known to help prevent the likelihood of a cyber attack or helps you recover well after a cyber attack. So there are a lot more controls. There used to be 35, and then they whittled it down to the Essential 8.
So why would they go from 35 to 8? Is it really simply to say this is the absolute basic that you've got to have?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And if you're going to focus your money anywhere, focus them on these Essential 8.
And those 8 are on that website, which we'll go to the references later? Yep. Excellent. So if you've already made changes, you have made changes, and should you still do risk assessments and talk us through some of the consequences of that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's never too late to do a risk assessment because, first of all, if you've never completed an information security risk assessment, it's definitely an eye-opener. Really get to know, what your information assets are and how you as a business are dependent upon those information assets and how they may be put at risk. So in going through significant change or even small changes, it's a really good idea to then see how that change has challenged your risk profile. So have you introduced new risks? Have you changed existing risks? So have you increased the likelihood of a risk event by now transferring everything onto an online payment system, for example? So you're then exposing yourself and opening yourself up to hacker events, whereas if everything was processed manually, internally, within your own systems, then that's obviously a different risk profile. Have you changed the impact? So you're now engaging with more third parties to help you become more resilient. You've expanded your network and your tribe, so to speak, to ensure that you can offer these new services. But then have you exposed yourself to different kind of risks, so third-party risks, for example? So it's never too late to make that assessment.
Okay. What 5 questions should an owner of a food and beverage business, for example, ask of their security or IT team or person?
Sure. Okay. What are the top 3 to 5 information security risks that we know about today? How do they apply and how do they affect our end goal? So how do they impact our business objectives? Secondly, looking at the news recently, we have My Budget, we've got Toll and Lion, who have all suffered ransomware attacks. So
before you go on, maybe can you explain what ransomware attacks actually are?
Absolutely. Okay, so ransomware attacks are essentially a user-compromised attack. So they typically come through a compromised email account. So you may have heard of a phishing attack with a PH, not phishing.
Yep.
So essentially, you've been given an email that might look very genuine. They're getting a lot better than they were. You're very unlikely to see any spelling mistakes. They're starting to be more intelligent, so actually taking on the persona or somebody within the region, or if they've been sat in the background within your organization, just sitting there and monitoring you. They may take on the persona of a chief executive, for example. So essentially, the baseline is do not click on any links that you're not expecting. Re-clarify with, say, third parties that you're doing transactions with. If you're not expecting them to send you a link to something, maybe confirm via a telephone call. Just say, I wasn't expecting this. Can I open it? Essentially, don't be shy to ask, because this is the lead-in for any hacker, essentially. So a ransomware attack is essentially, they can do one or two things. So My Budget, for example, unfortunately suffered an event earlier this year. Trying to think when it was.
It wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago.
No, probably
March or
a couple
April.
of months, yeah.
So they had their systems taken down, or did they take their systems down? Anyway,
something stopped working for a while.
Something stopped working for a while, so either something stops working, and they hold you to ransom and say, we will not bring your systems back online unless you pay us, or a company identifies that somebody is within their systems, and they then have to close down, proactively close down their systems to work out what's happened. In the case of My Budget, they closed down their systems, and the hacker group did actually put out a ransomware request, and they also posted their details on their hacker site with an extortion attempt to get even more money from them. If they didn't pay, they were going to release all the data that they had or said that they had collected out online. So they've actually been taken down from the hacker page, but there's no confirmation whether or not the ransom was paid. A lot of small businesses have historically paid ransomware, but haven't necessarily been able to restore all of their services or obtain all of their information back. So there's no guarantee, even if you do pay, to get all of that information back.
Sorry, I distracted you on the ransomware. So we're still
You
back
did.
to the questions for your IT and security team.
Yes. So those being an example,
Yeah.
you need to look inwardly. So get a full understanding. Okay, if that happened to us, you ask the what if question. So do we understand how it may play out within our organization? Where are we in the supply chain? Who do we need to inform, and how do we inform them? So Lion, for example, they suffered a breach, I believe it was last week, the 9th, I think, comes to mind. And they've been very proactive and, straightforward, saying, we've been hacked, it's subject to ransomware, and they're keeping everybody up to date. So that's great because they're fully aware of where they sit in the supply chain. So a great thing is to ensure that you have really good communication internally and externally. So everybody's, you're protecting brand reputation, everybody's clear about what's going on and where you situationally are. So the what if question. Where am I? 2, 3?
You're getting there.
Getting there. So how resilient are we? How can we prevent this happening? So this is a question around, okay, well, what assurances do we have or can we have in our controls? Do we have good information security controls in place? And how do we validate those controls to give us that level of assurance? So it's a case of increasing your reporting. It's okay to start down here. So it's a starting point. So you can always build on that, your security capabilities going forward. But it's really good to understand, where are you today in that regard? Other questions? So I'm going to look at my cheat sheet. I think I covered off, do we understand our supply chain risks? So this is third-party risks. So not only who are we going to impact if we suffer a data breach, but who's going to affect us?
Yeah.
So do we know our critical supply chain? Do we know, for example, Line as an example, how their systems being put out are going to affect our business? And what are the trigger points for those conversations? So Lion have been very good at sort of portraying their situation that they're going to start having a delay in production because they rely on their IT systems for that. So if I was a consumer of Lion's services and products, I would then look at, okay, well, how's that going to impact us, and who do we need to inform? What delays is that going to cause?
We've got a question that's come through from Ian. Where can we store our info that is outside of attack? So I think what that's really asking is how do you protect your information potentially outside of your own internal systems? Okay.
So depending on the size of the organisation, it really depends on where you can potentially store that. So again, this comes to understanding your current situation. What information do you have? Where do you currently store it? What are the options out there for you? Because yes, you could get a third party to store that information for you, whether it's in the cloud or a managed service. But then you need to ask questions around how secure are they? What assurances do you then need to get? And what information and how much information do you then put out there? The smaller end of town, might be okay just to put your information on an external hard drive, for example, just so you have a bit of security blanket there if all goes wrong. There are various options out there. You've got advanced cloud backup systems available. We've got Office 365, which a lot of companies are now buying into, which provides all that security and services because they have data stores in other countries, and the information isn't just in a single place. So really, it depends is the answer.
Another question come through. What are remote code execution attacks?
remote code execution attacks. I am not technical, so I'm not sure how technical you're expecting that response to be.
Well, I'm not either, so you can say what you like.
Remote code execution attack. I could have a guess, but I don't think even the audience would appreciate that conversation.
Well, let's move on to the next one then. How safe is it to store information in the cloud, or can the cloud be hacked? It sort of leads on to what you were just saying before.
Yeah, the cloud isn't, unfortunately, this magic solution that's going to resolve you of all your risk obligations. So it's just a term, essentially. It's a managed service. It could be a managed service. So the best thing you can do is to look at your contract terms, negotiate and talk to your cloud service providers, get an understanding of their posture to information security. And yeah, I mean, by all means, we're all using a cloud in some way or another. How you use cloud should depend on the sensitivity of the information that you're willing to put out there in the cloud. And I believe the ACSC also provide a lot of guidance around the use of cloud computing. And I also believe that the Office of the Information Commissioner provides some guidance around cloud computing as well in terms of managing personal information on the cloud. So there is a lot of information out there on being able to do risk assessments around your usage of cloud.
Yeah, so Pete Wadowitz has asked a question, can we get a copy of the 8 questions? Sure, Pete. At the end of this presentation, in fact, we've got a number of resources that will be on a slide that would include that your particular request as well. So. And I think that's really important for us to actually know where we can go to actually start this whole process. So that's great. We've got another question. How do you know if you have a sleeper attack that could be activated later on?
Okay, so there are quite a few terms. So it's in your ability to detect. So again, it depends how complex your environment is, what your capabilities are internally in being able to monitor your systems and networks, whether you have a managed service provider helping you with your networks, to be able to detect any anomalies, is something happening that shouldn't be there. If there's a dormant not just a hacker, but if there's a dormant virus sat in the background, without the detection capabilities and accurate monitoring, which could be costly, it's hard to tell. I mean, if we knew that, then a lot more information would be out there in terms of detection.
We've got another question. What are the implications? We've got a lot of cloud questions. What are the implications of having your data on a server inside Australia, outside Australia, or in the cloud?
Okay. So the implications really come down with the type of information that you want to store in the cloud again. So
there's a pretty common theme coming through with that. That's what you've really got to think about, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And are you and your clients expecting their information to be retained? So if you're doing a lot with government, they have a requirement to ensure that it's stored within Australia. Now, Microsoft, I probably shouldn't say names, but there are products out there which actually, state that they hold all data within Australia, and that could be a contractual requirement that you have. Other than that, again, it really depends the value of your information, what you're willing to place in the cloud, and the risk assessments around the cloud usage.
Fantastic. Looks like we've done our questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to sort of summarise or just those? We've talked about the questions and the 8 issues and all that sort of thing. Are there any sort of key messages that you'd like to leave the audience with? And maybe even the incidence of cyber attacks and cyber crime, just maybe a bit of an overall commentary?
Yeah, definitely. Utilise cyber resilience to your best advantage. So that's increasing your ability to anticipate. So what changes are happening? Are we seeing a greater increase in ransomware attacks, which we are? What does that mean? How can you prevent that happening to yourselves? How then are you able to detect those cyber risks happening? So again, understanding the potential viruses and what ransomware actually means, and then looking at your ability to respond to that. So are you able to, do you have the right team around you to be able to contain that incident, respond and recover? So it's essentially around cyber resilience, ensuring that you're protecting the business and it's aligned to the business needs and stakeholder objectives as well.
So it's obviously a technical issue and a problem, but the communication obviously sounds really important as well, that transparency and communication.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it was just a technical issue.
No, that's probably my lack of technical knowledge. But.
I'm not in favour of the word cyber. It's around information security is my preference, because it's all about what you need as a business, what assets you rely upon, and the assets include relationships as well. So that's not technology. It's being able to communicate with your peers in industry and understand, what are your pains, and learn from that as well. So there's not just technical problems, and there's not just the technical solutions either.
Yeah, which is why you've got all the steps to go through and you think about everything rather than just one thing.
Exactly.
So, excellent. I think back to you now, Amanda. Thank you very much, Yvonne.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne, and thank you, Catherine. That was fantastic, very interesting indeed, and lots of great questions.